Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is Physical Science, Chapter 1 on Forces, and we are in 1.4, the Magnetic Force, Part 3. Previously, in Part 2, we finished we started the experiment. So we got our spring scale and our magnetic force apparatus, and we figured out the thickness of one spacer. And then we had 8 spacers, figured out the distance, and then figured out the force to separate the magnets 3 times and got the average. And we repeated that for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 spacers. You want to double check that you are done with Q1, Q2, your data table is all filled out with units, and Q3. If you're not, please pause the video until you're done with that. Then we're going to start with day 2 for part 3 right now. And it says make a graph with magnetic force newtons on the vertical axis and distance between the magnets in millimeters on the horizontal axis. And there is a link that will bring you to the Google Classroom assignment for that. It's a Google Sheets. And then once we do that, we're going to draw a smooth curve that fits our data points and insert our graph here, and then answer a couple of questions. So you want to click on the link, and it should bring you to a Google Sheets 1.4 for the magnetic force lab that looks like this. If it does not, you'll want to pause the video and make sure you get that up before we continue. Next, you'll want to enter your data from your lab, from your data table. So the distance is going to be, starting with 8, we have 8.8 millimeters, 7.7, 6.6, and so on. And then we're going to ignore these 3 columns, and our force is we're going to use the average. So the average force for 8.8 millimeters was 0.5 newtons. You can see I already have the units up there. So the first one's 8.8 and then 0.5 newtons. So you want to go through and add all of your data, and you'll want to pause the video until you're done with that. Your numbers should be the same as mine. If they're not, then you'll want to take a minute and go back and look at your data table and maybe even the video of part 2. So I'm highlighting those 2 columns. And then I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to click on Chart. And I wait a minute, and magically a graph appears. And then we have this chart editor, which is going to be very helpful because we're going to do some changes. If you somehow click outside of the graph and the chart editor disappears, don't worry. You can always click on the chart again and then Edit Chart, and your chart editor will pop right back up. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to modify our horizontal axis, and the reasons for this will become clear in part 4 when we do our questions. So I click on that, and then you notice my chart editor changed and I came down to horizontal axis. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit until I get to min and max. And my min, I want to be 0, and my max, I want to be 12. So it should look like that. And then I'm going to come over here and click on my my vertical axis. And then it's pretty similar to that one, where I come down to min, and I want it 0 just like it is. But I would like it 5. I would like to go up by 1 more number. Okay, so your graph should look like this now. Next up, I want to go to series. I can either click here or I can click on one of the data points and they'll highlight in blue, and then this part will pop up. I'm going to use the right scroll bar and scroll down a little bit until I can see trend line, and I'm going to click on that. As you can see, it makes a line, but a line doesn't fit my data very well. Well, let's try exponential. And that fits a lot better. If you see this smooth curve really fits our data quite well. So our data is not linear, it is exponential. And I want to add a couple more grid lines in here. So I am going to go all the way down to the bottom with my right scroll bar, and I'm going to click on grid lines. And then this will pop up, and we're working on the vertical axis first. Doesn't really matter which one we do, but it already goes up by 1, which is great. So then I want to add a couple of more minor grid lines. So I'm going to click on minor grid lines and click on 4. And now you can see I have these little faint lines in there, and they go up by 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and 1 Newton. So each of these minor grid lines has a value of 0.2 newtons. Now I would like to do the other axis, so that's the horizontal axis. And I want some more major grid lines, so I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to type in 13 and push enter, and now you see it goes up by 1. So it counts 0 and 12 for a total of 13 lines. And I also want some minor grid lines. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to do 4 just like before, just like the vertical axis. And now you can see it goes up by 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 1 millimeter. Each of these vertical minor grid lines has a value of 0.2 millimeters. Okay, let's check our graph just like we always do. I have a title. I have my labels, my vertical and horizontal axes labeled with units. I have my numbers done, and I have my data with a smooth curve. So you just made a wonderful graph in Google Sheets. Good job. Now we're going to put that graph in our lab. So I'm going to go up to the right corner with those 3 dots, and I'm going to copy the chart, and then I'm going to go to my lab. I'm going to scroll down to where it says Insert Graph here, and I am going to highlight that, and I'm going to do Control V. This box will jump up, and yeah, I think we should keep the link to spreadsheet, and I click Paste, and magically my beautiful graph appears. We are going to use this to answer a couple of questions. Coming down to Q4, how would you describe your graph to someone who could not see it? Let's take a look at our graph. So you see, we start out and the question is the line a smooth curve, or is it a line that goes through my data points? And then is it increasing or is it decreasing as I go from left to right? And then does it start out steep in the beginning, decreasing steeply in the beginning, and then it kind of levels out and decreases more slowly as you go from left to right? Those are some questions you'll want to ask yourself, and then you'll want to write an answer. I'll start you out with a race answer. I would describe my graph as, and then you'll want to talk about what we just talked about, increasing, decreasing, linear, exponential, stuff like that. You'll want to pause the video until you're done with Q4 and then go to the purpose revisit. According to your graph, what happens to the magnetic force as the separation of the magnets gets larger? Does it increase? Does it decrease? Is it a linear relationship or an exponential relationship? So scrolling back up to our graph. So as the magnetic force increases, as the distance between the magnets increases, does the magnetic force increase or decrease? And then, are these two values linear, like a line, or exponential, like a smooth curve? So coming down to the question, using a race answer, as the separation of magnets gets larger, the magnetic force, and then you'll want to fill in your answer, increases or decreases, and is a linear or an exponential relationship between the two. Okay. Once you have finished that, you want to double check you have all your questions done and answered with units and in a sentence if needed, and then you'll want to submit your lab and your Google Sheets graph on Classroom. All right, good job, and I will see you next time. Bye.